In this video, we're going to discuss linear functions. Linear functions are a common type of function that are used to represent certain tandem relationships. What makes a linear function is that it has a constant rate of change. Previously, we talked about average rate of change, but in this case, the rate of change for a linear function never changes between any 2 points. So we say it's constant. That is what we think of as the common term slope. The way we're going to write a linear function is in the form f of x equals mx plus b. You're probably used to y equals mx plus b. We're just now changing this out for function notation. In this form, there's two important values to recognize. M, which is the slope, is also the same thing as that constant rate of change. And it can be found with the same formula, f of b minus f of a over b minus a. It's important to remember, and this will be particularly helpful later on, the slope, or the rate of change, tells us the change in output we will get when we increase the input by 1. B, you're probably familiar with, oftentimes being called the y-intercept, but we're no longer using necessarily just y, we're going to call it the vertical intercept. What's important to recognize about the vertical intercept is it will be the output when we input a value of 0. So let's look at how this relationship works. We're going to plug in 0, 1, 2, and 3 and see how the output changes. If we wanted to compute f of 0, we would need to do negative 3 times 0 plus 10. That would result in positive 10, 0, 10. Notice how when the input is 0, the output is 10. That is the relevance of the vertical intercept. If we were to plug in 1, f of 1 equals negative 3 times 1 plus 10, we'd get 7. If we plug in 2, negative 3 times 2 plus 10, we'll get an output of 4. And if we plug in 3, negative 3 times 3 plus 10, we'll get an output of 1. Notice how the outputs are changing. Each time the output is going down 3. Every time we increase the input by 1. That is all a result of our slope, which is negative 3. Let's talk about writing linear functions now. We know a linear function is going to be in the form f of x equals mx plus b. The two values we need to find here are m and b. We're going to begin by finding the slope first and then working backwards to find b. So let's find m first. We know m is the same thing as the change in outputs over the change in inputs. So I have outputs of 1,500 and 4,000. So the change would be 4,000 minus 1,500 over the change in inputs. 500 minus 300. That gives us 2,500 over 200. And so in this case, our slope would be 12.5. So once we find the slope, and we know that that is m, we're going to plug it in. F of x, so far we have equals 12.5x plus b. To find b, we can use either one of our points to work backwards. If we use the first point, we know that when we input 300, we should get an output of 1,500. So let's use that point and work backwards to find B. 1,500 equals 12.5 times 300 plus B. Using some algebra to work backwards, 1,500 equals 12.5 times 300, which is 3,750 plus B. And so if we subtract that over to get our value of B, we'll get B equals negative 2,250. So we would say f of x equals 12.5x minus 2,250. That function will allow us to plug in any value of x and determine the corresponding output.